Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you back for another excursion on the art train here at Fullerton College, which is at this point, I guess, kind of a conceptual college, but nevertheless, we're hard at it, right? I want to make my lecture this morning a little bit shorter than yesterday's, but just as meaningful, hopefully, right? So I'd like to just get right to it, if I may. Today we're going to be dealing with the issues of form and content. I alluded to this as being a crucial part of our exploration of art early on. And so we're going to jump into it a little bit today. So right here at the outset, before we start talking about what we mean by those terms, let's define them, shall we? So if you would, I'd like for you to go ahead and scroll down a little bit beneath this video down to where I've given you the definitions for those terms. And you'll see that they're, along with another term as well, which is iconography. And so when you see the definition of form, you see that we're talking about what we consider the perceptual elements that give structure to a work of art. Okay, perceptual comes from the word perceive, right? Anything that we can perceive, which is giving structure to the art that we experience. So when you're talking about form, you can be talking about elements such as line, shape, color, texture, and so on. Even the composition, to a degree, can be considered part of the form. The content, however, we define as the inner meaning of a work of art. And of course, that's what we want to get to when we can. The third definition has to do with iconography, and we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But those should be in your notes as items number 3, 4, and 5 on your word list, okay? Okay, so we will be referencing the textbook for this a little bit. If you scroll back up a little bit from the definitions, you'll see these images of these sculptures, okay, which are taken from your textbook, and they appear on page 34, where the text deals with form and content. So I'd like to begin by reading just a little bit from the textbook what it has to say about this issue. It says this: form is what we see. Content is the meaning we get from what we see. In this book, form refers to the total effect of the combined visual qualities within a work, including such components as materials, color, shape, line, and design. Content refers to the message or the meaning of the work of art, what the artist expresses or communicates to the viewer. Content determines form, but form expresses content. Thus, the two are inseparable. As form changes, content changes, etc., or vice versa, that is. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because what I want you to realize is that you're looking at two sculptures that are very different from one another, and yet they are both dealing with the same subject matter. In fact, they have the same titles, if you'll notice, right? The one at the top is by the great sculptor Rodin, Auguste Rodin, and he did it back in 1886. It's almost 6 feet tall, so it's life-size. The scale is life-size. It's made from marble, so it's very durable, and it's called The Kiss. Now, beneath it is a much smaller piece and a very different type of piece as far as form goes, right? It's by an artist by the name of Constantin Brancusi. Brancusi did this piece in 1916. He carved his out of a small piece of limestone. It's only 23 inches tall. But notice it has the same title, The Kiss. Okay, so here are two sculptures that are dealing with the same subject matter. What would you call the subject matter? Well, I think in both these cases, it's safe to say that we're talking about the subject of romantic love between a man and a woman, or male and female. Okay, The Kiss. So let's see what the textbook says about these two very different sculptures, which are dealing with the same subject matter. The next paragraph says, okay, it's going to say, for example, the sign that represents a human heart is a symbol of love. If someone were to give you a huge, beautifully made red velvet Valentine, so large it had to be pulled on a cart, you would probably be overwhelmed by the gesture. I don't think I ever got one like that. I hope somebody out there, I hope one of you has gotten one like that. Or perhaps maybe next Valentine's Day you might consider giving someone one like that. I don't know how much it would cost to buy the cart, but a little expense is okay for the one you love, right? Okay, but going on. The content of such a gesture would be love with an exclamation mark by it, okay? But if you were to receive a faint photocopied outline of a heart on a cheap piece of paper, you might read the content as love, sort of, a very impersonal kind. And if you were to receive a shriveled, greenish-brown, slightly moldy image of a heart, you might read the content as ugh, all right? So this is just kind of a bit of a humorous way the textbook is dealing with the issue of the relationship between form and content, okay? So the thing we want to recognize, I think, is that these two sculptures approach the subject very differently, and they have different things to say about it. It isn't that one is more effective than the other at talking about the issue, but just different approaches. So I want you to be thinking about that, because that's actually what we're going to be dealing with when we get to our discussion page in just a little while, okay? Now, the other thing you'll notice that I have there for you having to do with form and content, and the additional issue of iconography is a print that appears on page 38 of your textbook. And this is an amazing piece of work here done by the great German artist Dürer. Did it back in the 1500s, okay, so this is a very old piece. But as you'll see, your definition for iconography is the symbolic meaning of signs, subjects, and images. So it's all about symbolism, right? So scroll down, if you would, and take a closer look at this image. And what we see is a knight, and he's on an excursion. He's on a trip. He's going somewhere, and his travel is representative of life. The pathway of life. If you look at the top in the center of the image, you see the castle up on the hill. That's where he left, okay? That was his origin point. And he's come quite far. And as the text describes it, he's riding through the darkness of the valley of the shadow of death to reach the city of God, okay? So it's a very religious painting, actually, okay? So it's symbolic of life in that way. There are many symbols here. You'll notice that this strange-looking figure on the other side of him and the horse is holding an hourglass. That's a symbol of death, okay? So he's got death standing there, staring him in the eye, right? So it of course, symbolizes human mortality, right? And death has serpents in his hair, which are ancient symbols of death. You also, however, see a dog following along beside the horse. In Renaissance art and even older art, quite often the dog symbolizes fidelity, because as we all know, dogs are very loyal, okay? So this is a very symbolic image that you have to sort of look at closely to catch. There's even another more gruesome figure back behind the horse, which is the devil, right? So the brave knight is trying to live his life and get through all these difficulties. Okay, so iconography, symbolic stuff, okay? Now, my lecture this morning is purposely going to be a good bit shorter than it has been. I want you to spend time looking at the images below, and we're going to discuss this relationship between form and content, as I said, in our discussion page, and your assignment will have something to do with that as well. But before I go, I do want to talk about another issue that's really kind of a fun and interesting one, and it has to do with art and appearances, as your textbook refers to it. If you flip back to page 29, if you have your textbook, or when you do, you'll find that that's a heading there, art and appearances. And we'll come back and talk about other issues dealing with this later, but just to hit on this a little bit, I'm going to read this also from the text, what it says on page 29 under art and appearances. Art involves interpretation rather than replication. All art is interpretation, all right? A real horse, a painting of a horse, and a sculpture of a horse, each has its own reality, and each of these realities is substantially different from the others, okay? No matter how realistic a drawing or a painting is of a horse, it's still not a horse. It's an interpretation, right, of a horse. Artists may depict much of what they see in the physical world. They may alter appearances, or they may even invent forms not seen in either the natural or the human-made world. Regardless of their approaches, most artists invite viewers to see beyond mere appearance, okay? So in our next meeting, we're going to come back and deal with issues relating to that. There are terms we'll be learning are representational art, abstract art, and non-representational art, three broad categories of art that have to do with this whole issue of art and appearances, okay? But that's all I really want to say about that today. I do want you to spend a little time looking at the images that you see below the video here. In this, within this category of art and appearances, I've given you a couple of really fun, clever little videos that are examples of artists creating work that fools the eye, okay? And I think you'll find them pretty fascinating. There are two of them. They're both very short. And then that's followed by three paintings by one of my favorite artists. His name is Magritte, Rene Magritte. We'll be talking about him a little later on in our art history section because he's considered a surrealist, and we'll be talking about surrealism. But his images are so interesting and fun to look at, and the particular ones I chose, I think, have a lot to do with this issue of artists sort of fooling the eye and playing with this idea of the difference between what we call reality and appearances, okay? You notice the first couple, you have to look kind of closely to realize what you're seeing, that two of his paintings there, what you're seeing is the artist's easel with a painting on the easel sitting in front of the window, but the image painted, that's of the painting sitting on the easel, blends right in with the view from the window. It's very clever. The third one is very clever as well, but it's a little more subtle. That one is called The Empire of Light. And when you first look at it, you may get a sense that there's something not quite right about this painting, but you may not immediately realize it because it is kind of subtle. But what it is the trick that he's playing on us is that in that painting, the night scene, the house with the window lit and the yard, the shrubbery and all of that is painted as it would appear at night, very late at night, and yet the sky is painted like it's the middle of the day, okay? That may be something you immediately noticed or maybe not right offhand, but it's a very clever and effective thing that he's doing, playing around with this. Okay, I'm kind of checking my notes here and seeing if I forget anything, but I think I'm good. As I said, my remarks are shorter this morning. This is about a 15-minute video, and so if you would just move right along, look at those really fun little short videos below, and then move on into the rest of the class, the discussion. Don't forget the assignment. And check out the instructions for the next class meeting, which will be a little reading, okay? So, Good wishes to all, and I'll be talking to you a little bit on the discussion page, okay?